Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. I worked the night shift at a small local convenience store. It wasn't a dream job, but it covered rent and allowed me to attend community college classes during the day. Most nights followed the same pattern, the same regular customers, the constant hum of the soda cooler, old country songs playing on the radio, and every now and then, a moth trying to slip in through the glass. The store was located on the outskirts of town, next to a half-empty strip mall. Half of the businesses had for sale or closed signs in the windows. So once night fell, my store looked like a fluorescent-lit island, surrounded by a parking lot drowned in darkness. It was late March, and the early mornings were still cold, so I usually kept my hoodie over my uniform. By around 11 p.m., things would start to quiet down. The truckers had already come through for their coffee, and the college kids looking for snacks had gone back to their dorms. Then that heavy silence fell, the kind where every noise felt too loud. The flicker of the security light outside, the uneven tick-tock of the clock on the wall. That night was one of those nights when time seemed to drag. I had cleaned the counter twice, restocked the gum display, and was halfway through organizing the cigarette shelves when something moved in the corner of my eye. I looked toward the wide front windows, and I saw him. A man was standing under the tallest light pole, right on the edge where the asphalt melted into the shadow of the strip mall. He wasn't smoking, wasn't looking at his phone. He was just there, leaning against the pole, hands buried in the pockets of his jacket. At first, I thought he was waiting for someone. Occasionally, someone would call a rideshare that picked them up in the early hours, though almost never that far from the main road. I kept doing my tasks, glancing up now and then, but every time I looked, he was still in the same place, his head tilted just slightly toward the store. 15 minutes passed, then 30. He didn't move an inch. I kept telling myself it wasn't my problem. Maybe he was waiting for a friend. Maybe his car had broken down. Still, I couldn't help but sneak peeks at him whenever I passed the register. There was something about that unnatural stillness that unsettled me. Around 1 a.m., a couple came in to buy sodas. While they browsed the shelves, I took the chance to look again. The man was still there. The couple walked out without giving him so much as a glance, and I was left wondering if it was all in my head, if he was really focused on the store or if I was just paranoid. By 2 a.m., his posture had changed. He was no longer leaning against the pole, but standing straighter. Under the light, I could see more of his face, though at that distance, all I could make out was a pale, blank expression. The store was empty again. The parking lot was completely silent except for the faint hum of the lamps. I thought about calling the police's non-emergency line, but what would I even say? There's a man standing there. That wasn't a crime. By around 3 a.m., I noticed something new. The man had moved closer. Not much, maybe 6 meters, but enough for me to notice. The strange thing was that I never saw him walk. One moment he was under the pole, and the next he was between it and the dumpster enclosure. I convinced myself I must have missed it while counting change or stocking items. Still, my chest tightened with a feeling I couldn't shake. At 3:15, a delivery truck arrived with bread. I signed the sheet. The driver unloaded trays and carried them inside. When I looked back, the man was leaning against the pole again, as if nothing had happened. The truck left and the parking lot was empty again, except for him. When 4 a.m. finally came, I felt immense relief. I grabbed my bag from under the counter, closed the register, and went to the back to clock out. I kept telling myself not to be ridiculous. I would just walk straight to my car, get in, and go home. But the second I stepped outside, the air felt heavier, like everything had stopped. I looked toward the light pole. He wasn't there anymore. My heart started pounding as I turned my head in every direction. And then I saw him. He was leaning against my car. He wasn't looking at me or doing anything in particular. He just stood there, head slightly tilted, one hand resting on the hood. I froze for a moment before yelling, "Do you need something?" I hadn't meant to sound rude, but the words came out sharper than I expected. He didn't answer. He didn't even move. I stepped back toward the store door, fumbling for my keys in my pocket. "You need to get away from my car." Very slowly, too slowly, he straightened up and stepped back from the hood. But instead of leaving, he stopped just a few feet away, his gaze drifting past me, toward the brightly lit windows of the store. That look made my skin crawl. I managed to unlock the door, slip back inside, and lock it again. My hands were trembling. I grabbed the phone, but before I could dial, I saw movement through the glass. The man was walking away, not toward the street, but along the row of darkened storefronts in the strip mall. Within seconds, the shadows swallowed him completely. I waited inside for nearly half an hour before stepping out again. When I finally approached my car, the hood was still warm from his hand. I drove home without glancing once at the rearview mirror. The following night, I parked directly under the front windows. I never saw him again. But every time I worked late after that, my eyes automatically drifted to that light pole. And sometimes, even when no one was there, I could swear an invisible gaze was watching me from the dark edge of the parking lot. Story 2. I've been working the night shift at a small 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of Missoula for a few years now. It's a quiet job, and honestly, after driving trucks for over a decade, the calm of steady work in one place suited me. The station sits right off a service road near the interstate. There's just enough traffic to keep the lights on, but most nights, after midnight, the place is practically deserted. Montana in October always feels quieter than usual, as if even the wind knows how to keep its distance. The air is crisp, enough for you to see your breath, but not yet the deep bite of winter. On a clear night, you can hear the steady hum of the highway like a far-off river, with the occasional diesel engine breaking the monotony. I liked it. Stocking shelves, sweeping the floor, letting the clock crawl toward dawn. It was one of those slow nights. Around 1 a.m., I was leaning on the counter, sipping lukewarm coffee, half watching an old Western on the tiny TV by the register. Nobody had come in for at least 45 minutes. Then the door opened. A man walked in. I guessed he was between 45 and 50, tall but slouched like he was trying to make himself smaller. He wore a worn-out Carhartt jacket, stiff jeans caked with dirt, and a black baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. I remember how he gave the store a quick scan before approaching, his eyes never lingering on anything for long. "Hey," he said quietly. "Listen, could you help me put some gas in? I've got a buddy's car out back. Hasn't moved in a couple days." Right away, that struck me as odd. Nobody ever asks for help pumping gas, least of all to do it out back. Company policy doesn't allow it anyway. I asked why his friend couldn't bring the car around to the pumps. He said the guy could barely walk, having mobility issues. According to him, the car had run out of gas a couple nights ago. That detail set off alarms. I'd been out back earlier taking trash and hadn't seen any car parked there. And when a vehicle sits for days, you notice it. Still, I didn't want to outright refuse, so I told him I'd take a quick look. We stepped outside. The night air had that sharp edge to it. I noticed immediately that the back of the lot was darker than usual. One of the security lights had burned out. I followed him along the side of the building, each step of our boots echoing against the pavement. As we rounded the corner, I saw it. A dusty silver sedan sat at the edge of the property, where the gravel gave way to weeds. No plates. The windows fogged slightly from the inside. It looked like it hadn't been touched in days. That's when I noticed the silhouette. In the back seat, under a thin blanket, lay what appeared to be a person stretched out, completely motionless. I slowed my pace. "That your friend?" I asked. The man looked toward the car but didn't answer directly. "Yeah, he's resting. Not feeling too good." Something about the way he said resting sent a chill down my spine. I've seen plenty of people sleep in their cars. Rest areas are full of them. But this felt different. I moved closer. The blanket was pulled tight over the figure, almost like it had been wrapped. No breathing. No movement. Nothing. just absolute stillness. Suddenly, the man's tone shifted. "Hey, you got one of those red gas cans? I'll pay cash. Just need a gallon or two to get us going." I told him we didn't have any. He pressed, offering to leave his ID, even his jacket. I could feel his eyes on me while I looked at the car. Then, from the far edge of the lot, I heard something. It didn't come from the car. It was a faint rustle in the weeds, followed by what sounded like a short cough, or a muffled groan. The man's head snapped toward the sound, then back at me. His voice dropped lower. "Don't worry, it's just the wind." But it wasn't. In my mind, the pieces started fitting together. No plates. A car abandoned for days. Someone in the back seat, wrapped up and unmoving. And this man showing up in the middle of the night, asking me to help him fuel it. I told him I needed to check with my manager about policy. His face tightened for a second, but then he nodded. Walking back toward the front, I kept my stride steady, trying not to show how badly I wanted distance between us. Once inside, I locked the door and grabbed the phone. I called the police's non-emergency line and told them exactly what I'd seen. A suspicious man, an abandoned car with no plates, and what looked like an unmoving person in the back seat. They said they'd send a patrol to check it out. As I spoke, I saw the man walk past the windows. He tested the door, realized it was locked, stood there staring at me for a moment, then drifted off toward the side of the building. For several minutes, I lost sight of him. I focused on the security monitors. The rear lot camera was terrible, mostly shadows, but I managed to catch glimpses of movement near the car. About 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled in quietly, lights off. The officers spoke with me first, then headed around back. From inside, I watched their flashlights sweep over the gravel and the car. One of them opened the rear door. The blanket slid down. From where I stood, I couldn't make out much detail, but I knew instantly that person wasn't asleep. The officer's body language said it all. He turned, radioed in, and everything shifted. Another unit arrived, then an ambulance. They kept me inside while they worked. After a while, one officer came in to take my statement. He didn't tell me much, just that the person in the car was in very bad shape and had been there a long time. As for the man who came into the store, they hadn't found him. I finished my shift that night, but every creak in the building set my nerves on edge. His face kept replaying in my head, how calm he seemed at first, and how quickly his demeanor shifted once I started asking questions. For weeks afterward, I couldn't help glancing at the back lot every time I stepped outside. The car was gone by the next afternoon, but in my mind, it's still there, parked among the shadows with that still figure in the back seat. And somewhere out there, the man who wanted me to help him put gas in it is still walking free. Story 3. I worked the night shift at a small gas station wedged between the highway on-ramp and an empty shopping center that never managed to fill up for 2 years straight. Nights at the station were usually quiet, the kind of calm I liked. I'm not a morning person and I hate crowds, so the graveyard shift always felt like a refuge. The pay wasn't great, but I could listen to music, sip coffee, and watch the occasional drunk stumble in looking for chips or cigarettes. That June night started out like any other, humid but with just enough breeze to keep the heat from becoming suffocating. I had a steady flow of customers until about 1:30 a.m., mostly people coming back from the bars. By 2:45, the parking lot was empty and the road out front was silent. My closing was never a real closing since the pump stayed card only until morning. My tasks after that hour were to count the register, lock the interior doors, and clean up. Part of the routine included checking the bathroom in the back before clocking out. There was only one, unisex with a single stall, tucked away in the farthest corner past the storage room. It was nothing special. A linoleum floor that never looked quite clean no matter how much you scrubbed. A flickering fluorescent lamp that never stopped buzzing, and a ceiling fan that whirred with a dull, irritating hum. I grabbed the bathroom key hanging by the register and headed back. The plan was to do a quick check, spray some cleaner, and be done. But when I got there, I noticed the door wasn't locked. Not unusual, sometimes customers forgot to slide the bolt. The strange thing was that the light inside was off. Normally, even if they didn't lock it, they left the lamp on. I nudged the door open a few inches, expecting to see an empty room. Instead, I caught the faint outline of a person standing in the far corner facing the wall. It took me a few seconds to process what I was seeing. No movement, no sound, just a medium-sized figure, arms hanging at their sides. My first thought was that it was a drunk who had wandered in and somehow fallen asleep standing up, if that was even possible. "Hey," I said, trying not to sound too loud. "We're closed, you okay?" No response. I reached for the light switch just inside the door, but before I could flip it, a voice whispered, low, dry, and flat, "No." I froze with my hand on the wall. It wasn't the embarrassed no of someone joking around or caught off guard. It was flat, serious. Something in my gut screamed that this wasn't just some drunk. "Look, man," I said, stepping back a little. "You can't stay in here. I'm closing up." Silence. The figure didn't turn, didn't move, didn't make a single sound. The longer the silence dragged on, the more I noticed the details. The posture was too rigid, as if bracing against something. The head tilted downward, not in a sleepy way, but like it was staring intently at something invisible on the wall. I backed up into the storage room, left the bathroom door ajar, and pulled out my phone. With no security on site, calling the police seemed like the smart move. I explained the situation to the dispatcher. A man in the bathroom, unresponsive, acting strangely. They told me they'd send a patrol in a few minutes. While I waited, I kept my eyes fixed on the doorway. I didn't hear footsteps, no toilet flush, no water from the sink, just the steady drone of the ceiling fan. Then, 2 minutes later, the bathroom door creaked open. The man walked out slowly, still facing away from me, and headed down the hallway toward the front of the store. In the dim light of the storage room, I saw him clearly. A hooded sweatshirt pulled up, dark jeans, work boots. His walk had something unsettling about it. A calmness like he knew no one would dare stop him. I stayed perfectly still, letting him pass by the register without a word. He didn't look at me, didn't look at anything. Just kept walking until he reached the main door, pushed it open, and stepped into the darkness. The strangest part was that when I went to check, I realized I had never heard the front door open earlier. That meant he had been inside the whole time. By the time the police showed up, barely 3 minutes later, the man was gone. I gave them a description. Hoodie, jeans, boots. Nothing else. I hadn't seen his face clearly. An officer checked the bathroom and found nothing out of the ordinary. No graffiti, no drug paraphernalia, no smell of alcohol. Nothing. When I asked if I should be worried, he just shrugged. Maybe he was just looking for a place to crash. Make sure to keep the door locked from now on. That's what I did. But what stuck with me wasn't just that he had been in there. It was what I found the next morning when the day shift came in. I'd gone to grab something from the back, and on the bathroom wall, exactly where the man had been staring, I found fresh scratches in the paint. They weren't random scuffs. They were straight vertical lines, about a dozen of them, all the same length, as if someone had dragged their fingernails or a tool over and over again into the wall. The man never came back, and to this day I still don't know why he told me not to turn on the light. Story 4. I've always been a night owl, but nothing prepared me for the kind of nights you experience working alone at a rural gas station. I'm 24, live in Bakersfield, California, and took this job to make some extra cash while figuring out my next steps. The pay wasn't great, but the hours worked for me, and most nights were so dull they almost felt safe. The station sits on a lonely stretch of highway, the kind where cars come in waves, 20 minutes of nothing, then 3 vehicles at once. We've got 2 pumps, a tiny shop, and a flickering neon open sign that's older than me. Inside, there's only a counter, a few snack shelves, and a soda cooler whose steady hum almost drowns out the silence. Most nights, nothing happens. A trucker might come in for coffee, or a couple of locals for beer. But one Thursday night in June, I had an encounter I still can't shake from my mind. Around midnight, I saw her coming up from the dark shoulder of the highway. At first, I thought her car had broken down. She looked to be in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, wearing jeans and a faded hoodie. The hood covered part of her face, but her eyes caught the fluorescent light as she stepped inside. "Hi," she said softly. "Would you mind if I waited here for a while?" Her tone was calm, but there was a thread of unease beneath it. My first instinct was to say yes. Company was rare, and I welcomed the interaction. But the request sounded strange. People usually buy something first, and if they linger, it's afterward. Nobody opens with, "Let me wait inside." "Is everything okay?" I asked. She hesitated before replying. "Yeah, it's safer here." That word, safer, stuck in my mind. I explained that technically people weren't allowed to hang out without buying something, but she could pick up anything and stay as long as she wanted. She nodded slowly, went to the cooler, and pulled out a bottle of water. I rang her up and she paid in cash. The whole time, her gaze kept flicking to the wide front windows. Not casually, like she was checking to see if it was still out there. I asked if she had a car nearby. She shook her head. She had been walking for a while. She didn't explain further. Then she sat at the small coffee bar and stayed silent. Every now and then she whispered something under her breath, but I never caught the words. I wanted to ask, but the stiffness in her posture, like she was braced for something, kept me quiet. About 20 minutes later, a dark sedan rolled slowly past the station. That wasn't unusual at that hour, but this one didn't keep going. It pulled into the lot and stopped under the farthest lamp. I could see the driver's outline, but the windows were tinted too dark to make out details. The woman snapped her head toward the window, her whole body tensing. "It's him," she whispered. I froze. "Who?" She didn't answer. She just clutched her water bottle and moved deeper into the store, away from the glass. The sedan sat there for a full minute. Then, without pulling up to the pumps or the entrance, it rolled back out and disappeared onto the highway. When I turned to ask her what that was about, she was already on her feet. "Thanks for letting me stay," she said quickly, and slipped out before I could stop her. I stood outside for a moment, watching her walk in the opposite direction of the car. She never looked back. Within seconds, the darkness swallowed her beyond the glow of the lamps. The rest of the night felt different. Every pair of headlights in the distance made my stomach tighten. I half expected the sedan to return, but it never did. At least not while I was there. The next night, I couldn't get her out of my head. Who was him? Why hadn't she stayed until morning? I even checked local news for any mention of a missing woman, but found nothing. 2 nights later, she came back. Same hoodie, same slow walk from the highway. This time, she looked even more on edge. "Please," she said as soon as she stepped inside. "Can I stay here for a while?" I didn't hesitate. I told her she could stay as long as she needed. For the first half hour, we barely spoke. She sat at the same spot by the coffee bar, hands locked around a cup she never drank from. Finally, she broke the silence. "Last time, he followed me here." A chill ran through me. "The guy in the sedan." She nodded, eyes fixed on the window. "He's been following me for weeks. Not every night. Just enough to remind me he's still out there." I wanted to ask why she didn't go to the police, but she cut me off. "I already tried. They can't do anything until he does something. And when he does..." She didn't finish. At 1:30 a.m., headlights appeared down the road. She stiffened instantly. The car pulled closer and I recognized it right away, the same dark sedan. It stopped in the exact same spot as before. This time my heart was pounding in my ears. I reached under the counter where we kept a bat for emergencies. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out, cap pulled low over his face. He didn't head for the pumps or the store. He just stood there, staring through the glass. "Call the police," she whispered. I grabbed the phone, dialed 911. As I spoke to the dispatcher, he turned, walked back to his car, and drove off without a word. The police arrived 15 minutes later. By then, he was gone. They took our statements, but admitted they couldn't do much without a license plate or a direct threat. "Just suspicious behavior," they called it. That night she left with the officers, though she didn't look any safer. It was the last time I ever saw her in person. A week later, when I came in for my shift, I found something taped to the glass door. A note scrawled in rushed, uneven handwriting. "Thank you for not turning me away. He already knows where I sleep." No name, no return address. I stood there a long time, staring at those words. The paper felt heavier than it should have. For the next month, my nerves betrayed me whenever a car drove too slowly past the station. Sometimes I'd catch my own reflection in the window and half expect to see someone behind me. I still work there, but my routine has changed. I lock the doors after midnight, even though I'm technically not supposed to. And when headlights linger in the lot too long, I keep one hand near the phone. Because in the end, she came into my life twice, and both times she left the same way she arrived, disappearing into the darkness. And whoever he was, I can't shake the feeling that she's still looking over her shoulder. Story 5. Tuesday nights were my favorite because they had a predictable rhythm. By 11, the regulars were gone. Mr. Perez with his menthols, the nurse with her grape drink, and the guy who always wanted to talk about football. After that, it was just me, with a faint playlist overhead and the steady hum of the cooler behind the counter. My blue Corolla was parked under the brightest light, perfectly visible from the register. That light cast sharp, clean shadows across the concrete, something that reassured me, because everything felt clear and recognizable. It was chilly for Tampa. I wore my hoodie under my uniform, and I had already locked the door, hung the bathroom key back on its hook, and left everything in order. Silence filled the place, but suddenly the silence grew too heavy. The cooler shut off, the hallway fan spun down, and the calm took on a strange charged quality. I looked up. Outside, leaning on the hood of my Corolla, was a man. He had no phone, no cigarette. He was just there, resting against it. Head turned just enough to seem like he was waiting for someone. I checked the side camera. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching the street. Mid-30s, clean cap, gray zip-up hoodie, dusty jeans. His sneakers looked newer than the rest of his clothes. He stood like the car was his. And people don't lean on cars that don't belong to them. I slipped my hand into the pocket of my hoodie, curling my fingers around my keys. The pumps were empty. The road deserted. The tire shop across the way closed. I thought about calling my manager, but he would only tell me to call the non-emergency line, and they'd probably say a man standing around wasn't a crime. So I decided to confront him. I gave myself permission to step outside. "Hey," I said flatly, "that's my car." He turned and smiled as if he'd just told a joke. "Your mom sent me." I let out a short laugh. "No, she didn't. She called me, said you get out at midnight." I pointed toward the store. "She lives 3 states away. She's definitely asleep. She's worried about you walking alone. Said you park under the big light." That was easy enough to guess, but the way he said it hit hard, like it was proof. He shifted casually, blocking the driver's door. "What's her name?" I asked. He waved vaguely. "She knows your boss. Said you'd get nervous." "I'm not," I lied, scanning the lot. "What's her name?" He didn't answer, just glanced toward the register window, like he expected a manager to appear. "I've got things to do," he said, still smiling. "I'm not waiting all night." "Then leave. You're on my car." He stepped back, like he'd failed some kind of test. Then he walked slowly toward me, closing the gap. I backed up into the doorway, bracing my foot against it. "Call your mom," he said, lifting his phone. On the screen was Mom, but anyone can name a contact that. He didn't call. He just waited for me to believe it. I slipped back inside and locked the deadbolt. The metallic click gave me a strange kind of strength. He stopped at the window, then walked around to the passenger side. I pressed my remote, and the locks clicked. My hazard lights flashed. He saw it and watched me watching him. I grabbed the phone and dialed the non-emergency line. "There's a man leaning on my car, says my mom sent him. He's blocking the driver's door. Is he trying to get into the store? They asked. No, he's trying to get me to come out. We've got a patrol nearby. Stay inside. Just then, a sedan pulled up to pump 3. A girl about my age. She saw me, saw him. I motioned frantically, begging her to wait. She stayed in her car, watching, an unwilling witness. He pretended not to notice her. Circled my car, peered in the windows, knocked on the glass, then looked at me, mouthing something. Maybe it was, "Are you ready?" That's how I took it anyway. I texted my boss. There's a man at my car, says my mom sent him. I already called the police. He replied, okay. The man drifted back to the front of my car, leaning on the spot I'd have to pass if I tried to escape through the passenger side. He had it planned. The girl at pump 3 cracked her window. You okay? She asked. Police are on their way, I said, signaling. She nodded, kept her engine running, headlights pinned to my bumper. He didn't like being watched. He shifted again, blocking her view of my door, rested his hand on the roof like it was his. Seriously, he said. Your mom asked me to take you. Don't make this weird. What's her name? I asked again. Silence. He stared at the store sign like searching for help. His other hand slid into his pocket. A rideshare SUV passed slowly, then kept going. He watched it. I didn't move. Then the store phone rang. I answered without taking my eyes off him. Station. A low voice on the line. Are you ready? And then it hung up. Blocked number. I set the receiver down. I didn't know if it was him or someone else, but it fit too perfectly. A patrol car rolled into the lot, lights off. The officer stepped out. I recognized him. He was a regular coffee customer. He didn't shout, just walked toward us like he was looking for a snack. The man raised a hand casually. The cop said something. The man gestured toward my car, hands moving as he talked. The officer looked at him, then at me. I nodded. They spoke in low voices. I caught a few words. Mom ride misunderstanding. The officer didn't budge. You're trespassing on her vehicle. Leave. The man laughed, shrugged, like it was all reasonable. Another patrol arrived. The first officer stepped inside. You okay? Yes, I said, giving the short version. He nodded. We'll issue a no trespass order. If he comes back, call immediately. Outside, the second officer took the man's information. He spun a story. They walked him to the edge of the lot. He never looked back. The girl from pump 3 came in to pay. She had the money clenched tight in her fist. You want me to wait until you're in your car? She offered. Yes, I said. 2 minutes. We wrapped up quickly. I locked the office. She watched as the officer walked me to my car. She waited until I started it. I sat with the fan blasting, breathing deep. Then I drove home on a different route. Lit streets, porches glowing. Places where a scream might get help. When I got home, I texted my mom. We needed a code word. Something silly. Something only we knew. And if anyone ever claimed to come from her again, they'd have to say it. If they couldn't, I'd never open the door. Because maybe the scariest part wasn't the stranger outside. It was realizing I might have already passed him before, unnoticed. If you think the most terrifying thing wasn't the man himself, but that thought that he could have been around me before without me knowing. Hit like, subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and tell me in the comments how you would have handled a shift like this. Stay alert, stay safe. Thanks for watching and see you in the next nightmare.